Hi, Bachar. And Maximov here for Precious Payloads. It's so good to have you here and to hear out the study of reaction dynamics. And yeah, please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for the introduction. My name is Bachar Elzein. I'm a Reaction Dynamics Chief Executive Officer and Chief Technical Officer as well. At Reaction Dynamics, we provide launch services for the emerging smallsat market. What makes us different is we're using hybrid rocket propulsion to propel our launch vehicle to orbit. And this is really a solution allowing us to cut our prices for our customers by about threefolds when compared to competitive offers. But we can also cut our carbon emissions, which is really something very exciting. One quick remark, very often people think of Amazon as a e-commerce company, which is not necessarily true. People, in reality, Amazon is an infrastructure company. They provide the infrastructure and the services to deliver customers with packages. Basically, they funnel those packages from sellers to customers. And we want to do the same thing with our orbital launch services. We want to use our rockets in the same way that Amazon, they're using their delivery system to deliver payloads from Earth to orbit in the cheapest way, but also in the greenest way.
Thank you. That's great. And I feel like personally, I've been in the industry since 2015. And if I'm not mistaken, the reaction dynamic was also founded around the same time. And I feel like, when I just entered the industry, there were a lot of talks and buzz around not only Rocket Lab, Firefly, version Orbit, but also like Vector, if you remember such a name. And I remember that, reaction dynamics was always there in the industry reports, but not a part of this, let's say, space race of micro launchers. And now, like 7 years after that, we've seen a lot of companies do the orbital attempts. And reaction dynamics has been this like silent giants awakening in Canada. So if you could share with me like a few like key milestones in the inception of the company.
So indeed, we've been around since 2017. Some of the key milestones. So there's a few things to keep in mind. No rocket has gone to orbit using hybrid rocket propulsion. It's a new technology. The other thing, Canada is the only G7 country that doesn't have orbital launch services. We're the only country in the G7 that doesn't have its own launch services. So that means there's a whole ecosystem to create to enable launch. There's suppliers to coach. There is staff to hire. So it's really you're building an industry around you. So some of those key milestones that we've achieved so far, we're extremely proud to say that we've been testing on almost a weekly basis the RE-21, which is an orbital class rocket engine. We've been able to develop, design, and qualify this engine and test it for a fraction of what's required from other companies to get to a point where you have an orbital class rocket engine. This engine have a thrust of about 20,000 kilonewtons. Its ISP is very, very decent for what you would expect from hybrid. Thrust rate ratio is really outstanding. So it's really aspect that we needed to really start from the beginning. You cannot rely on suppliers to sell you gaskets or to sell you any components that are typically existing in countries that have orbital launch capabilities. So we had to start from scratch. So we've been doing those tests as early as last year, and we're hoping to have the flight version of the RE-201, which is a 202, tested in the next few weeks. So this engine is the one that will propel our first rocket that we're looking to fly in first half of 2023.
Thanks for that. And say a few words about the importance of hybrid technology, because I know that there have been at least like one company in Singapore that was teasing the hybrid rocket engine. There maybe was another one in Asia doing that. So why is it important? What does it yield to the end customer? Like why hybrid is like a special angle that's brings advantage to your company?
It's a great question. We put a lot of emphasis on responsiveness. And we put a lot of emphasis on reducing the costs. If you want to be in a position where you're offering dedicated launch at a price that is really cheaper, your price per kilo is lower, you have to do it with a different technology. Everybody's using, a cost and a launch vehicle or cost of a rocket propulsion system, rocket engine, is not proportional to size. It's proportional to complexity. And a small rocket engine such as what's being used by our competitors, is still a very complex part. It's not much cheaper than a big rocket engine that can provide, say, compare that to Merlin 1D. A smaller rocket engine is going to be within the same ballpark. It's not like an order of magnitude or 2 order of magnitude cheaper, even though the thrust is a fraction of what you can do. So we understood that if we wanted to offer prices to our customers that can be much lower than what our other companies are using, we have to use a different baseline technology. We have to go do something different. And why we care a lot about hybrids, and why, how we're able to leverage hybrids and deliver the value that we're delivering. Those systems are much simpler. Our rocket engines are made of parts I can count on a single hand, literally, which means you reduce your production time, you reduce your cost dramatically. You can also reduce your lead time. So when customers are coming and they want to have a launch with you, we can promise launches within a few weeks. So the time it takes us to produce a rocket is about 3 weeks. And the time it will take us to go from order to launch, we aim for a month and a half. And I'm not throwing the 3-week number. It's not a projection. We own the manufacturing equipment. We own the 3D printers to make those rocket engines. And with the current equipment, it takes us 6 days to make a rocket engine. It will take us a day when we'll get the new printers. So this is really something that is absolutely dramatic when you compare that to the current offering in the launch market. And this is why hybrids, they're such a great technology. This is why we're able to leverage that in a sense.
I really like that you touch base on the responsiveness, because it's also something that we really care about with our customers. And I think there's like 2 angles, right? First is the hardware aspect of it, right? If you have the pre-manufactured blocks of 3D printers in place that allow you to set up the launch range with the rocket on it for the customer 45 days, that's great. But can you talk a bit more about your sort of legal environment, about getting the launch license, securing the range, getting the permissions to launch?
Great question.
Yeah, because that also defines the responsiveness. And the reason why I'm particularly excited to work with Canadian launch sector is because there's quite a big chunk of the markets that doesn't want to go to USA for launch, not only because of like political reasons, whatever, but sometimes it's just simple issue of getting the visas for their key engineers and everything. And that's where the Canadian emerging launch industry can and should provide a solution to that problem. But I'm curious to know, like, what's your take on the second leg of the responsibility being getting the everything from importing the payloads to Canada, applying for launch license. So can you talk a bit more about that?
This is a great question. We say that very often. Launch responsiveness is not only the launch vehicle, it's the whole value chain. It's the launch site, it's regulations, it's the integration, it's the production of the launch vehicle, it's the time it takes you to get the launch licensing, everything. And the DARPA Launch Challenge, one of the key objectives of the DARPA Launch Challenge was to streamline launch regulations. Of course, that enabled a few companies to exist and a few companies to provide demonstrations of their technology, such as Astra, most notably. But it was mostly aimed and geared to streamline the launch regulation aspect. Of course, in the US, they're more ahead than what we are in Canada. We're still working on establishing launch regulations in Canada for orbital launch. So there is a possibility to have orbital launches in Canada, but it is a la carte. We have exemptions to proceed. And we're talking to Transport Canada very closely, and this is something that is entirely doable. And we hope that the Canadian launch regulations will emulate, in a sense, the launch regulations in the US, Part 450 of the FAA and such. But where you also have to be very mindful is on the launch sites. We work with some great partners in Canada and abroad to have access to launch sites with very short lead times. So if we have an opportunity to launch for our customers, we can launch from several launch sites. So if one launch site is crowded, we can, pick the satellite, pick the rocket, go somewhere else. The rocket is designed to fit in a container. In fact, in not a single container, but to fit in several containers so that it can be shipped, by marine transport or even aircraft transport in some cases. So this is really something that gives us a lot of flexibility. And I think that that's really one aspect that complements responsiveness a lot, is really having that flexibility as well. You can hit several orbital inclinations. In fact, you can hit the same orbital inclination, the same altitude from several orbital launch sites. So it's really something where being stranded to a single launch site is not necessarily ideal for your customers. It minimizes costs and it really helps with operations. But this is where I think the cost of the overall launch vehicle is helpful. If you have a cheaper, affordable launch vehicle, well, you can afford to have a slightly higher operational costs to offer your customers that nice responsiveness they're looking for. Because if your launch vehicle is expensive, well, in that case, you have to shave off on everything. And that means, well, maybe having that extra flexibility is not an option.
I can imagine that's at least for the first few missions, you'll be only launching from Canadian soil. So can you talk a bit about what are the projected launch sites within Canada? And then is it like only one? Are there multiple? If yes, how do they differ from each other in terms of inclinations and the launch cadence?
There's currently one commercial launch site in Canada. It's with our partners with MLS. They've been doing amazing work to move forward on that launch site. They got their launch, their approvals very recently, the environmental assessments as well. So this is really outstanding milestones, and it's been years and years and years in working. I've been talking to Steve since 2017 for a long time. So we've known what they're doing. We've been aware of their progress, and we've been aware of the hard work they had to invest into that project to make it happen. So for launches in Canada, it will be with MLS. It's the only commercial spaceport, but it's also, we have an outstanding relationship with them. That they bring a lot of value on the table. They have a lot of experience, a lot of pedigree, and this is really something. And again, very, very openly, they take care of an aspect that is really very neglected often in launch, which is ground infrastructure that you need to enable launch, which is very critical. It's something that is not. It can be expensive. So they have an interesting vision on that front. We have also other discussions with other partners abroad. We have a signed agreement to launch from Australia with the Southern Launch that has been signed a while ago. And we're also talking to other options, to other launch sites. We hope to make some announcements soon so that we can, provide a different offering to our customers. Because, as you stated, there's some customers that may not want to send their satellites to the US for legal reasons. It's complex for them to get the paperwork and everything. But there's also a lot of customers, and more that don't really want to ship their satellite at all. There's customers, and specifically in Europe, there's more and more pressure for European satellite companies to launch on European rockets, or launch from continental Europe, or launch from Europe short. So this is really something that we have to be mindful to, and having that opportunity where we can ship the rocket and go to the launch site and have everything operating there, and really coming to the customer instead of having the customer send their satellite to us is really one interesting option that makes us, I don't want to say launch site agnostic, but really gives us more flexibility than you typically have from a launch company.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, because again, our one of the main offices that we have is based in Abu Dhabi, and in the Middle East, there's been, I don't know, hundreds of hours spent together between the US launch companies and the local governments to try to convince the Department of Defense in the US to allow the import of the launch vehicles to the region for commercial use. But unfortunately, the US Department of Defense treats the orbital vehicles as ICBMs, and they do not allow the import of the rockets to the region. And yeah, but there is, again, a lot of prep work has been done in the Middle East to explore that. And as of now, there are like at least multiple studies going on across the Gulf region in the Arab world on trying to find that partner that could, like not US partner, that could set up the launch facility either within the extended MENA region, or even like in parts of the world like Canada or Australia, because it doesn't necessarily need to be done from
That's interesting.
The countries, but there's definitely a lot of use cases for that.
Oh, for sure. I can agree.
Yeah, good. And where do you see like because you already mentioned like this push towards localization of the launch industry within Europe, UK, US, some other places. Like, where do you see the biggest market for you down the line?
Of course, our ambition is to be global, is to really be everywhere and offer launch services to whoever is looking for a responsive, affordable, and environmentally friendly launch service, be it in Canada or everywhere else. The Canadian market on its own is really fairly big. In fact, it's about $3 billion give and take that companies will have to invest to put their payloads into orbit. So that's not. Of course, the U.S. market is pretty. It's much bigger. It's really, I think, the single largest segment in the world is really the US for sure. The US market, there's a lot of companies already providing launch services there, so there's a lot of competition. But I truly believe that if you can offer that dedicated aspect, if you're able to offer a dedicated launch at a price similar to what you'd pay for rideshare, the price per kilo, there's always going to be room for you. And if you can do it in a responsive way and a eco-friendly way, that there's even more room. So for now, we want to really concentrate on Canada, concentrate on some of the customers we're talking to in Europe, and we will see where the market will take us. Of course, I'm pretty much sure if you ask people 10 years ago where the market would be today, I think very few people will have really a very, very precise idea. And it's going to be the same thing in the next 10 years. At least we know that there's growth, but is that growth going to be driven by national security, by defense, or is it going to be driven by commercial opportunities? This is really something that it will depend. But something that I can guarantee you, there's always going to be need for a low-cost, responsive, and eco-friendly launch vehicle, and this is exactly what we're trying to do. In fact, this is exactly what we are doing. No need to try. We're there already.
Very good, very good. And in terms of the potential business lines in the addressable market. So, the typical conversation that a customer has a launch company, it basically stems on like three main, pillars of access to space, right? Because the technology that you guys are developing can be used for orbital launches, of course, the dedicated rideshare, but as well, there's quite a niche but growing business of suborbital launches as well, right? And there's a number of companies that are trying to say, hey, we'll do the suborbital launch trajectory as the stepping stone towards the orbital capability, but we also want to continue doing this suborbital launches as a separate line of business. A good example is, let's say, Swedish Space Corporation, right, that has a suborbital express that goes similar, like not as frequent, but a similar concept to a SpaceX transporter mission, right? It just sits there, waits for the rideshare customers, and then goes like on the suborbital trajectory. Do you see that as a potential business line of yours?
It's a great question. I would say if the opportunity is big enough and if it doesn't derail or slow us down towards our progress to the orbital launch that we're trying, that we want to do within 2 years, generating revenue these days will really be more and more precious because we've seen, how the markets are reacting to companies that are overvalued or companies that have a high market cap but are not generating the value that is expected because their revenue or this or that. So, and again, these corrections are part of the economic cycle. It's not really something that we can control. So, generating revenue is going to be more and more important. But I would add to that, there's also other options that can be very interesting for our technology. It's really for OTVs and for thrusters. And the market for OTVs in orbit propulsion is almost as big as the launch market. Yes. So if you have a technology that can offer those, eco-friendly aspects, but still provide good performance that can be manufactured in an affordable way and such, this is also another segment that we're exploring to generate revenue, even earlier than the launch vehicle, than having orbital launch. Suborbital launch is a very interesting option, but I think it's, again, it will depend. It will depend on the opportunities, and this is, at this point, we'll be able to make that decision once we see who's interested and who's looking for one.
So, Bachar, speaking about the stepping stones towards demonstrating orbital capability for your launch system, can you talk to me about what are the key milestones ahead of the orbital attempts that you're looking forward to?
Definitely. The first milestone that we're focusing on, first and foremost, is to have a technology demonstration of our hybrid rocket propulsion system. So the orbital vehicle has a cluster of multiple engines in the first stage.
Mhm.
We're taking one of these engines and we're building a suborbital launch vehicle around it. Our goal is to have a launch demonstration of that vehicle in the future before getting to a suborbital launch and basically our technology demonstrator. Our goal is to have an integrated stage test. So you'll take the rocket as is, the rocket that is flying, you bolt it on the ground, you test fire it exactly as if you're having a flight. You validate the functioning of the avionics, you validate the health of the engine, you validate pretty much everything. And once you're happy with that, well, you pick it up, ship the rocket, and ready to go. Before we get to the point where we have the integrated stage test, you'll be looking at having engine demonstrations. So between the next few weeks, our goal is really to take the RE202, have test firing on it, move the needle, and be in a position where we have a full duration burn of that engine. Of course, before we have the integrated stage test.
Very good. And how big is the team now that is working on this series of launches?
We're a nice team of about 46 people, if you include everyone.
Oh, wow. And where's the headquarters of the company?
We're in Montreal. Our headquarters are in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, which is a small city in the suburbs of Montreal and the Southern Shore. Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu have been outstandingly supportive. We have our offices there. This is where we do the manufacturing. This is where we have our manufacturing equipment. And we do the testing in Joliette, which is a town in the northern suburbs of Montreal, which is about an hour away from here.
Very good. Thank you so much.